You're listening to an Anazao Ministries podcast.
All right. Now playing at the SG Drive-In, we have the classic Superman 2. And guys, I am excited. If I'm being honest with y'all, I'm excited for this one because this is a first for me in the life of systematic ecology. I have been with this man on group shows, panel shows, but I finally get a chance to talk one-on-one with Kino himself. How we doing, brother?
I'm fine. Yourself? I don't like how y'all be boosting me up. I don't do too much. I just love what I love and I just enjoy what I enjoy. But this right here is something that I'm really excited about. I was like, yes, let's do this. Superman 2. I'm ready. I am ready, sir.
So this is one of those movies that it sits in the annals of history as far as, for a DC guy like myself, point to this generation of movies as that for a group of people, this is Superman.
Correct.
For a group of people, like this is when you talk about Superman, this is Superman. Christopher Reeves, this is the guy.
He is the only Superman we should ever acknowledge. Everyone else is false idols, okay? Everyone else is false idols, okay? Christopher Reeve is Superman and will forever be Superman. No one else compares.
Yeah. So I found something interesting going back and watching this one, right? I am of the opinion that, like, I remember I was probably something like 10. I was young when I first saw the Christopher Reeve Superman movies. Mm-hmm. And, I appreciated them, all of that kind of stuff. I feel like when I was younger, I thought they were a little boring because being a 90s kid and cartoons and Power Rangers and all of the stuff of the generation is just a lot more just a lot faster paced media in general than like 70s, 80s stuff. So it's kind of easy to look at it through that lens, but looking at it as I've gotten older, I found an interesting thing happen. I love Christopher Reeves as Superman. And honestly, with other IPs, I'm a Flash guy. The Flash is my guy. And my favorite Flash villain is Reverse Flash.
Okay.
But that's because Eobard Thawne has story and nuance and all of those kinds of things. I cannot stand the character of General Zod.
Oh.
I think General Zod is lazy. I think that is just, I understand, I get it, why that's such a thing. But like, as an adult now watching this, I'm like, I would watch this movie with glee if it was anybody else other than just, so we're gonna, what happens if Superman with a guy with all of the same powers breaks bad and all of that. And I understand that that's a conversation to be had, but I'm like, there's so much depth to the roster when you talk about Superman's rogues gallery that, like, this is just boring to me as a character.
Yeah. So let's establish something before we get into more details. One, this movie, which I did not know until I went back and watched it again, did some research, it was on his second director.
Yep.
So the first director, which was, what was his name? I had it up too. What guy's name?
Not Richard Donner.
Yeah, not Richard Donner. Yeah. I think it's Richard Lester.
Yeah.
He came in because the producers wanted to control the narrative, in essence. They're just Hollywood big shots. And so what we saw was a movie where Hollywood had his hand all in it, and the only reason it did good because of the main character. Because outside of that, I agree with you that this Zod, General Zod, that was just weird. Like, it seems like we're watching someone who has the same powers as Superman, but yet not use them. And then he discovers that he can do other stuff too. We're gonna get into it because that whole instant transmission thing they was doing in the Fortress of Solitude. I'm like, what is that about?
Yeah. And I'm not even like, so I wouldn't, I would say that other DC characters, I could sit here and tell you kind of the longevity of the character, and I can sit here and tell you the nuance of it all, and and all of those kinds of things, right? With Soups, he was part of the animated series world. For me growing up, he was part of the periphery, but as a kid, I always had the opinion it's easy to be a superhero when you're a god. That it's just that outside of that, Soups is boring and all of that. But what struck me as I've gotten older is this is a man who has the powers of a god and chooses to use them for good.
Yes.
He chooses to do the right thing, truth, justice, blah, 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 blah. And that is where the interesting factor kicks in. You know what I mean? So I look at something like this, and I'm like, this whole era, I can appreciate it for what it is, because this is more of looking at the ideal of Superman versus something like Man of Steel, where a lot of people's main gripe with Man of Steel was Superman kills. Like Superman's dark or brooding or whatever. And yeah, it's not Christopher Reeves. You're right. It is not the pinnacle. And honestly, I hear every single argument that's like, this is that's what Superman is created to be. That's the idea behind it.
Right.
And going off of it, yeah, you can go to these other versions of, or these other superheroes and toy around and say, okay, so what if this part of the personality was different? What if this, what if that? And you just you're supposed to leave Superman alone to be the benchmark for what a hero is. So I can appreciate it from that aspect.
Okay.
Looking at it from somebody who's of a different generation than the main group of people that say Christopher Reeves is the guy when you talk about Superman.
So let's establish that these superhero movies in the late 70s and 80s were the thing. It was, and I grew. I'm a child of the 80s, so it was the opportunity for us to actually see what was in the comics on the big screen.
Right.
And you got to think that at that time, they was taking the stuff that was there. There was no anti-hero. There was no personality complex or no issues with their own character. Those things at the time.
Right.
So when you put all that in and you see, hey, this is what Superman looks like. This is how Superman should be. Yeah. So I get it because I'm also a fan of Krypton. I'm also a fan of Krypton. I like Krypton. I like that show Krypton that comes on the Sci-Fi Network. I'm a fan of Krypton. But I also like what was the guy? Who's the Man of Steel? What's his name?
Henry Cavill.
Is that Henry Cavill with the chin? That he was in the other thing? Yeah, I like him. I like him as Superman. Yeah. I like him as Superman. However, it is again, it's because of the generational things and again the development and the evolution of the superhero films.
Yeah.
That what we had is what we had, and literally Star Wars, Indiana Jones, and Superman was it. It was it, and you'd be able to see something, especially for Superman, be able to see a comic on the big screen and somebody embody that which identified Christopher Reeve. It was it, but to try to come back and say that these other iterations of Superman, it just won't do that for me, just because that's just he is who
right.
he is.
And I think that's the power of somebody like Tyler Hoechlin, who's currently playing the TV show Superman. There's character nuance to him where you see him struggling with certain things and how do I be a dad and how do I be a husband and so on and so forth, but also hinging closer to the more idealistic Superman rather than like the dark and broody Superman that is the Man of Steel Superman. Like, and that I think that probably is the best example that we've had of marrying those two worlds and creating something that's maybe a little bit more human, but also like this guy is still a paragon for virtue and things like that.
Yeah.
I will say, as far as Christopher Reeve's Superman, you hit the nail on the head when you say that this Superman is larger than life. This Superman comes off the page. This Superman is one that you can you can put stock into. This is one that embodies the character in a way that Henry Cavill did not do, other iterations did not do. Like this is a guy that you look at him in the suit and you say, if superheroes were real, this man would be Superman.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And again, it's not to take away from all the other actors that have played Superman since. It is just that Christopher Reeve was that guy.
Yeah.
He was, and I hate to say it, but when he had fallen off their horse and broke it, we were like, Superman is gone. Not Christopher Reeve, the actor or the person. Right. No, we was like, Superman. There's no more Superman. There'll be no more Superman movies, especially after he had gotten hurt and he had fallen off the horse and broke his neck. Yeah, that was devastating. Like that was huge news.
Right.
Yeah. And but that's the power of movies and finding the right character to play that right that matches the expectations and the ideas from the comics to bring it to life. And it's very hard to do. But I think this was one of the best iterations of Superman that DC had ever did at that time, especially at this time, because this movie was it was interesting going back and watching it, because I remember watching it as a kid and this was just cool, just Zod and Ursa and Non being trapped in that what's the thing called they were trapped in?
The Phantom Zone?
The Phantom Zone, and just seeing that as a kid on the film and on TV, and just like, wow, this is so cool. But watching that, I was like, oh my gosh, this was they really did some ingenuitive type things before CGI. Yeah, that was the beauty of this one, that they were able to incorporate, just like with Star Wars and even all the other ones, that they were able to do some stuff with the movies and the edits and angles and all that stuff that you could not accomplish back then, but they was able to do it, which made the film even better. Yeah,
and I think if we're being honest about it, there's a crop of movies that, regardless of genre, come from the same era, and all of them are highly and well regarded as like the tentpole movies for effects and things like that.
Yeah, but I think along with the effects, I'm gonna go back to it is the leading actor that also carries this movie. Because I didn't realize that the difference between the first Superman and the second one, outside of the director, was Marlon Brando. And so they cut Marlon Brando out. But that was it. Funny enough, it was okay because of Christopher Reeve, like because of his star power and his presence on the screen. It actually made which not trying to be funny, but whenever you're trying to do a sequel with another director, it never works out for real. Like, it never works out. But somehow this one was able to work out only because of Christopher Reeve. And this is another thing I did not know. Mario Puzo wrote this script.
Really?
Yes, I'm a huge Mario Puzo fan. I've read all of his books, and I'm a huge Godfather fan. And when I saw that, I was like, "Oh my gosh, I did not know that." So that even changed the dynamic for me. Okay, I see this movie in a different light with that.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, I did not know that. I did not know that.
Yeah.
And the fact that this movie, one of the things that's caught me with a lot of these SG drive-in movies is it's either a group of people that are ultimately somewhat disconnected from the era where the movie came from, talking about the movie, or it's people from different generations that are talking about this movie that can come together out of a shared love for the movie. And it speaks to the fact that this movie is even remembered the way that it is speaks to the strength of it, because you look at this same concept, right? Actor or director changeovers, right? Well, we just had a whole section of movies, but for better or for worse. You know what I mean? I'm not commenting personal opinion on these three movies, but we just had 3 Star Wars movies that changed hands. And collectively, most people will call them a dumpster fire. You know what I mean? Like, and whatever. If you like them, cool. That's not the point. But we see the same concepts with turmoil, with Hollywood meddling, with all of these issues, where ultimately it leads to a very diminished product. And yeah, you can say what you will about the theatrical cut versus the Donner cut, which is its own thing. This is the first time, where we saw a wholesale, give us the cut of that the director made rather than that Hollywood made.
Right.
This is the first instance that we saw of that. But say what you will, there are aspects of both movies that if you compare the two movies side by side, there are things that the theatrical cut did that made no sense in the Donner cut.
Correct.
And there were some things that the Donner cut did that made no sense.
Correct.
Or
vice versa.
Yeah, vice versa.
Yeah. And the rub. So out of DC and Marvel, I hate to say this, but I think Marvel gets it right with trying to keep some continuity with either the same producers or the same executive producers, that there's something that's keeping that same lineage going, that you can tell that this is a Marvel movie that is done well, even if you have a different director, even if you have different act, even if you bring up a different hero, there's a common thread that keeps it together.
And geek fans in general are a finicky group, but comic book fans are a weird group, because we simultaneously understand that you can do a lot of things with continuity and telling different stories and being adventurous and all of those kinds of things. But at the same token, we want to know that regardless of what adventure we're reading, we're still reading Superman, we're still reading Batman, we're still reading the Justice League, we're still reading whatever Marvel character, like that we are still reading this character that we appreciate and we like, and that we make it clear when there's not when you've broken off from what is established. And I think that that's part of why, fast forwarding a little bit, you've got somebody like Brandon Routh, the guy that came in for Superman, I think it's Superman Returns, where they tried to set it in the same universe and tried to say, oh, hey, guys, this is Superman. The biggest mistake that they made was trying to set it in the same world as to say that this is the same Superman that Christopher Reeves was. You need to separate yourself from this guy that lived and embodied this character. You need to separate yourself. And if you want to do a new Superman, do a new Superman, but don't try and make it so that way it's the same guy, because eagle-eyed fans that care about that sort of thing are absolutely, they're not going to watch the movie on its own merits. They're going to watch the movie saying #not my Superman, because that you're trying to compare it to a seminal version of the character. Yeah, and the reality of that is that there's a big difference between the era of DC movies that we're talking about here and the current crop of DC movies. you look at, and I want to make sure that we give everybody their flowers. Christopher Reeves is half of of half of the dynamic. The other half is Margaret Kidder, right? That's her name. The Lois.
Yes.
Okay, so the continuity of those two characters together really did a lot to carry forward that through line that you're talking about with these Superman movies. And even at its worst, you know, you look at Superman 3, even at its worst, there was could still say this was the same years. This still smells the same. This still looks the same. This still seems like the same universe. And that's something that you can't necessarily say with modern day DC. Now, I will sit here and tell you that I think from an artistic standpoint, I think if you go in without any preconceived bias, the Snyder cut of Justice League is a really good movie. I think it just stop trying to look at it like a Marvel movie,
right?
And you can enjoy an artistic take on the Justice League.
Yes,
fine.
I agree.
And I'm good with that. When you're looking at something that I want to see the big blue Boy Scout brought to life,
right.
I want to see Superman brought to life, that like those two together, the continuity of them is a huge part of what pushes the ball forward of making this such a seminal classic for superhero storytelling on the big screen.
Yeah, and that because DC did decide to at least keep the main characters throughout these three films, made it work for them in such a way, like you said, that it made it feel like this is what it's supposed to be. Yeah. Regardless of the movie itself, the fact that you had Christopher Reeves and Margaret
Margaret Kidder.
Yes, Margaret Kidder as Lois and Superman, that made the films good, and especially with this one, because you have Lois finding out that Superman, Clark Kent is Superman, and then discovering that him telling her about his origin and bringing her to this Fortress of Solitude, and that whole dynamic between, like, that was good chemistry. That was another good thing about this movie, was the chemistry between those two that made it work. Like, you wanted to see them together. You wanted them to see them together, and you hate that whenever time Lois got in trouble, but you knew Superman was going to be there to get her. Except for that one time when she jumped I was like, why are you jumping Niagara Falls? He was like, Lois, grab that twig. He was not going to jump in that water just to save her. Oh. That was funny.
One of the things that I found interesting about these movies, and it's kind of a similar notion with when Will and I talked about Batman '89. You know, everybody talks about how the pearls and popcorn, right? Nobody, you know, we are sick and tired of seeing the pearls and popcorn. But Batman '89 was the first time in live action that we had seen pearls and popcorn. And it was the first time that they did it was the best time that they did it. Say with this was a similar deal. When you're talking about Krypton, when you're talking about the establishment of where Superman comes from and his backstory and things like that, I think that this established something that, yes, over time got overdone and got redone and all of those kinds of things. But this is probably the best portrayal of that I can look to, as far as Krypton exploding and understanding his backstory and where he comes from and explaining all of it. And I honestly, I think that that's part of why I too like the show Krypton, because it shows. It feels like it's set in the same kind in the same Krypton that was shown that was expressed here.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like it had a similar feel to it that kind of is that same level of well done.
Right. And let's also establish that when you try to take a comic book hero and tell their story in a 2-hour film, that's hard to do. That is very hard to do. That's very hard to do. You have to decide how much of his backstory you want to show, how much of his evolution and his development as the superhero. That is hard to decide. And so even though we as fans want it all on the screen, you can give us all of that on the screen because that'll be just too much. Bro, that's what we want. That's what we want. But I think this film did a good job in trying to give us some more of his origin story. But I do think that they missed the mark with Zod and Ursa and Nan. I think they were just if you ask me, that was the only low point. Is just their introduction into the universe that way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It doesn't help for me. Like I said, like I think overall the concept of Zod is boring. I think there's way more interesting when you look at, the ridiculous amount of Superman villains that there are. It's just, I get why you do it. It's easiest to do something like that.
It's I think Zod is the easiest one that doesn't require that much of development or backstory taken away from the main character. I think that's, but they could have chose somebody else though. They could have. They could allowed Gene Hackman, Lex Luthor to run free as Lex Luthor. You know what I'm saying? Like that could have been even better. But this was a good film. Like this was an actual good film to even rewatch. Because I think I watched it last week or this week sometime. Anyway, but to rewatch it and sit down and like, oh my gosh, this was actually a good film. And I remember watching it as a kid, just being in awe and amazed, like this is Superman. And that's why I would like to forever, Christopher Reeve will forever be Superman, because of how he just embodied that role, not taken away from any other actors that have played Superman ever since. But I think he set the standard and the tone. I think this is one of the best films, not the best film, but at least because we're talking about this one, this was a good film to watch. And if you have the time and opportunity, go back and watch it again. Because it's a good movie.
Yeah. And honestly, I think one of the things that really stood out to me, I am of the type, which is exactly why I'm on this show, that I enjoy asking questions. I enjoy poking and prodding and looking at things philosophically and looking at that portion of it, as well as, is this something that, is it, I enjoy the Superman of it all. Mm-hmm. I enjoy the fact that he embodies that portion of it, but he also did all of that in a manner that also made the man behind the cape also believable. You look at this man who struggled with identity and stuff like that, and that, to me, that was compelling. That's where you tell the story of Superman. Allow for him to poke and prod and really come into his own of accepting the responsibility of being Superman and what that means, especially when you incorporate, he wants to be in this relationship with Lois Lane. He wants to have a life with her, but he can't just walk away from being Superman and all of that. And I think for those of us that, I honestly, I think as Christians, that's something that we should be looking at, but that's something that humans can be looking at as well. Yeah. Just generally speaking.
And I think that is more prevalent now with social media, because funny enough, we still can't separate that which we see is only a snippet in time that someone took to show us something, but that doesn't mean that's the reality.
Right.
And I think that's another issue that we have in society, is that who people are that we see that they're showing us is not all of them because we don't know them fully. However, because we feel like we know them on social media, because they post a lot on social media, we feel like we know them, we know their lives, but no, there's always more to this story, to this individual, and also how they're grappling with their own identity. Because some people like to post on social media just to get the likes. Some people want to tell a story. Some people just want to be out there. But to say that I know someone based off of their posts doesn't mean that I know them fully. I just know their post. And I think that's another thing that we saw with Superman is he was struggling to maintain his identity as Clark Kent, but also knowing that he was Superman. But how do you, if you know that you have these powers and abilities, how do you still maintain your humanity even though you're not human? And he decided to say, especially in this movie, you know what, I would rather be human than to be Superman because I want to know what it felt like, but also realizing that he had other responsibilities. And that's what I think that we miss is that even as believers, as people, we still have responsibilities. Like we have to be responsible for what we do and what we say. And we feel like we can go and say whatever we want. No, you cannot. You cannot just go and slap somebody in the face because you felt like it. No, that's going to have consequences to it.
Yeah. Actions have consequences, and how we interact with people. Being a Christian doesn't give you carte blanche freedom. I'm speaking truth. Speaking truth is not licensed to be a jerk. It's just not.
Correct.
You know what I mean? And that toting those worlds, being not of this world, but being in this world, that when we are able to navigate that under the rule and reign of God, that is when we push forward the kingdom of God. That is when we exemplify the kingdom that is here and now, looking towards the kingdom that has not yet come. And when with a movie like this, I love these kinds of movies because it recontextualizes. I've called it. I've been on each one of the C.S. Lewis episodes so far during the year of Lewis because I am a huge Narnia fan. And one of the beautiful things about Lewis's work is that it has baked into it reflections of truth. You know, yes, we look at The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe as kind of the biggest example of it, and in many ways it is. But looking even past that, throughout the rest of his works are also reflections of truth. And that's what makes it so beautiful, because it's reflection of truth told in a compelling story. Guys, this movie is a reflection of truth told in a really compelling story with awesome actors that really embody this and allow for you to just, you know what? Let me live in this world. Let me live in this world for 90 minutes. Let me play in this sandbox. And if you can do that, if you can make people truly suspend their disbelief and say, what if I played in this sandbox for 90 minutes? What if I was in this world for 90 minutes? That is something that's a beautiful experience. And that's the thing that makes lifelong fans of IPs. That is why you listen to Kino and you hear him say, this movie from the 70s is such an important piece for me and my fandom. I look at something like this and I'm like, this is awesome character storytelling. And this is something that I can relate to and I can sink my teeth into because they were willing to allow for a movie that you could live in.
Preach. You know, I think one of the things that, and I identify with Superman, that I struggle with is the idea of being a pastor versus being just a person.
Yeah.
Because people perceive me as a pastor that I should govern myself. Like literally it trips people out that if they say we finna go drink, I'm like, I want to go too. Let's go. Wait, you're a pastor. So what does that mean?
Right.
I cannot have a drink because I'm a preacher? No, I love to tell people. Let me remind you that at the Last Supper, there was wine. And Jesus' first miracle, he turned water into wine. And they said that water into wine that he turned was better than the first stuff. So no, you can't tell me he didn't have any of that his disciples didn't have any of that. No, but that's the rub. And so My thing is, I think the greatest ministry that we have is to be authentic to ourselves, but never lose our identity of who we are.
Right.
And I think I think that's what Superman did, because after he realized, oh my gosh, like I still have responsibilities that I cannot just live my life the way I want to, but I can still live my life. I just have to make sacrifices in how I live. And those sacrifices don't hinder him. It actually makes him better. And I believe that people get all caught up on the sacrifices. No, it's a good sacrifice to do for somebody else, because not only do you help them, but you help yourself, because you're doing this. This is what another thing I preach a lot is that we have a responsibility to become the hands and feet of Christ. A lot of times people don't see God until we show them by how we act and how we treat people. And we got to know that it's a good sacrifice, but hey, what did Jesus say? It's okay to give up to gain it all. But we don't recognize that once I give it up, they think we're losing it all. In actuality, you gain so much more. You just don't realize it because you're spending so much time trying to hold on to it.
Yeah. And that's the thing, right? Like we hold with such ferocity the things of this world and all of that, because we are humans, because we only see part of the equation, and that's part of the human condition. But the reality is that if we can conceptualize what we're doing when we are giving up parts of ourself, when we are giving up certain aspects of our life and things like that, we are engaging with the freedom to follow the rules.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a hot button sentence for some people, because following the rules is a weird concept because humans have made it weird.
Mm-hmm.
But the reality is that we can, if we give up these things that we chase so hard after, that we give so much of our life to pursue and things like that, and we live in the good and true ways, we are no longer bound to giving up the energy, giving up the time, giving up the focus of chasing the rabbit that we were never meant to chase in the first place, that we then have the freedom to be able to live in a way that ultimately produces good in our life, that produces this beauty and sustenance. We look at the reality of how God called us to live.
Mm-hmm.
It looks stiff-necked from the outside, but dude, look at it. It is freeing. You live in that way that lives by the playbook that we are given, and suddenly life becomes clearer. We live holy and set apart, and that doesn't mean that we live in our echo chambers and we live in we have to come down hard on this, that, and the other thing, and if you don't think this way, you're wrong, and all this kind of stuff. No, it allows us to actually see clearly when interacting with the world around us. We can live and breathe in a way that you cannot when you are bound and shackled by this world. And honestly, that this stuff that we're talking about, this last 10-15 minutes of this conversation, this is the stuff that brings me to the yard. This is the stuff that gets me fired up, and I love about dissecting this stuff, because if you can allow to peel back the layers of the onion a little bit, and you can allow to poke and prod at these stories, ultimately it's a superhero film. Ultimately, it's a fictional character. But if you look at how these concepts apply to your life, then you can start asking some questions and push on the walls of the bubble. Guys, we're not supposed to just be walking mindlessly from point A to point B. No, test and see that the Lord is good.
Yeah. And not only should we push, but we should always question.
Yes.
Question. Don't be afraid to ask the question. What we're afraid of is the answer.
Exactly.
We are scared of the answer. But if you ask the question, it makes us then say, I don't understand. Can we get some clarity? And that is all right. But I want to caution folks that when you ask God the question, be ready for his answer. Because I love when Job was like, I need to have an audience with you. I need to sit down with you because I got to understand what's going on. And God, I'll never forget this. God said, okay, you want to have a talk? Gird up your loins and let's sit down and have a talk. Where were you when I made the stars in the sky? Where were you when I created all this? You was not here. So you don't understand the vastness of it all. But to you and for us, we have to wrestle with how do we all fit into all of this that God created. And if we just remember that we have a responsibility to ourselves and to God, and that's it, we're doing the part that God called us to do. But we be wondering, like, what's their part? What's their part? No, don't worry about nobody else. No, you do what you're supposed to do. And if everybody do what they're supposed to do, we'll be fine. You know, here's the funny thing. I don't know if I seen it on TikTok or I think I seen a video talking about traffic jams. I know this sounds crazy, but traffic jams only happen because people are tailgating. Yep. There's a scientific proven fact that if people do the 3 cars length, no matter where it is, there'll be no traffic because the distance is preventing traffic. I mean, the distance is allowing traffic to flow like it should. But because we're worried about the next person, because we're not thinking about ourselves, because we're worrying about everybody else and not our own, we always have traffic jams. And that's not how it's supposed to be.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, that's a scientific fact that, yeah, I've heard that before. You know, and that's this whole thing, you know, I think when we realize the paradigm and the parameters, that is where all of the other stuff falls into place. If we are being the hands and feet of Christ, if we are loving the world, if we are loving our enemies and so on and so forth, all of those things, those are all things that we can strive to do as humans, or we do out of relationship with God.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and that's the beauty of when it's all coming out of a place of relationship with God. Yeah, that relationship with God means that I don't do some things.
Mm-hmm.
My relationship with my wife means that I don't do certain things.
Mm-hmm.
Not because, it's legalistic. And unfortunately, it feels like it needs to be said that there are likely some, if just law of averages being what it is, that there's probably somebody who has heard all of this in a very, very religious context and all of that kind of stuff. They've heard most of what we're saying here in a very religious context. But when we are not doing the certain things, we are ultimately net better.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, we're following the rules, but we're doing so because that is what is best for us.
Right.
That is God. That is God's best for our life, and that is ultimately God's will. Is what that no man shall perish.
Mm-hmm.
That and everything stems from that, and you can see when when you live out of that place, when that's your base minimum, right? Then you can see the beauty and the things that reflect that. To get back to the whole Superman, the whole Superman of it all, like that, then you can say, well, hold the phone. We're looking at the big blue Boy Scout, and this dude that does have the powers of a god, that is faster than a speeding bullet, that is all of these things. You mean to tell me he struggles with some of the same stuff that I struggle with? Mm-hmm. This character is 3 and 4 dimensional enough to go through some of the same things that I go through.
Ooh.
Whoa, that's something. That's meaty.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
And now suddenly that you've opened yourself up to thinking and exploring and pushing and prodding, now suddenly you have that now the world is your oyster.
Right.
Now God is saying you understand base minimum. You understand the rules of engagement. Guys, go play.
Right. Right.
It's not about should I go do A or should I go do B? Is it this or is it that? No, it's you understand how to conduct yourself in this world. Go play.
Go play. Go play. And I think we miss that this life is set up for us to play within the rules that God has laid for us, and that's it. That if we follow those, then what the scripture says, whom the Son sets free is free indeed. It's freeing because hey, okay, I'm not going to do this because this is not going to help me. It's not going to benefit me. Now, it might feel good. It might look good, but it has no benefit for me. And if we can get off of this hedonistic notion that I got to do this because it makes me feel good. No, some stuff that makes you feel good is not good for you. I.e., if you keep eating Bojangles, if you keep eating Bojangles, I don't think you have Bojangles where you are, but if you keep eating Popeyes, if you keep eating fried chicken every day, it's going to have an impact on your life. Now we think that okay, but that you can take that with food, you can take that with sex, you can take that with money, you can take that with jobs, you can take anything. That if you do anything in excess, it's going to have a detrimental effect on your mind, body, and spirit. However, that's why it's important that you follow what Christ said, because Jesus gave us the great model that he didn't even be around the people all the time. That Jesus took time to be by himself. He practiced self-care. He practiced being in prayer. He practiced praying. He practiced building relationship. He practiced rebuking people. He did all of that stuff. And if we can see that in Superman, how Superman struggled, and then we take it to the Christ, Jesus, and how Jesus struggled, because Jesus got angry. Jesus had to deal with a lot of people talking about him, trying to come after him. He didn't lose focus because he knew the rules. He played within the rules. And I think that's a good point that you was pointing out, that if we can just recognize that the struggle of humanity is so universal that everybody has to figure out how they're going to play. But the best way to figure it out is to go back to the rule book. Just go back to the rule book. Just read the Bible. Just read it. And if you could, one of the greatest things I love about the Bible is it is a soap opera on words. It is a soap opera on words. You talking about issues and stuff, but they're like, I don't want to do. Yeah, but if you recognize that even in their struggles, God was with them, then you can recognize that God is with us even in our struggles. We just have to be open to that. And that's what you'll see the difference. And then Superman was open to changing to who he was to become for somebody else, which he realized it didn't work for him. He realized it didn't work for him because he saw that he had responsibilities and the world was in need of him. And I hate to say this, but the truth is, for somebody, the world needs you. God made you for you. And the truth is that you thinking that nobody cares about you, somebody needs you just as much as you feel like you need them, because you have something that no one else has, and that's you. And God made you that way. And that's the way Superman was. Superman is Superman. There's no other Superman. There's no other Superman, because he was created in such a way that his needs and abilities will help somebody else. That's the same thing for us. The same thing for us.
So with that, dude, this was an absolute blast. These are the kinds of conversations that I love to have on these episodes. So as always, as we wrap up here, the best recommendation that we can give: go and watch this movie.
Yes.
Go watch through. Yes, even Superman 3.
Yes.
Go experience Christopher Reeve's Superman, because it brings the character to life. And as you're watching it, do not be afraid to ask the questions, to poke and prod and all of that. Also, do not be afraid to go to systematicgeekology.org to listen to the rest of the SG Drive-In lineup and the rest of everything that we've got going on, and to learn more about our illustrious panel of hosts. And if that is not enough for you and you want to help us keep doing what we're doing and keep the lights on, head on over to patreon.com/systematicgeekology. Tons of bonus materials over there every month. And last but certainly not least, remember, we are all a chosen people, a geekdom of priests.
This was an Anazao Ministries podcast. If you enjoyed this show and would like to learn more about our network, be sure to check out the Anazao Ministries Podcast Network.